Greetings, friends, family, and survivors. Well, it's going to snow here on this side of the Cascades, I think Sunday through next Thursday. That's good. I like time release rain. But that got me to thinking. I was having a conversation with a pastor friend of mine that lives about a mile away from our new house. And he said last year it took 5 hours to get home from church one day. And I said, well, why? He says, well, two main hills going up the mountain there was a half a dozen cars crisscrossed all over, blocking the road, and nobody could get to their plow trucks and their winch trucks to clear the road, so they had to wait till everybody dug themselves out. And that got me to thinking, I've lived that way before when I lived in Green Valley Lake, which is at 7,000 feet. And the snow piles up pretty fast there. I've seen 2 foot an hour there many times. And your preparations aren't any better than the one that went up the mountain in front of you, right? And that made me realize that this was probably the right thing to do. There's few things that can pull a heavy four-wheel drive, especially a diesel. They're so heavy, out of the snow, so you might as well as plan on being the one that pull others out of the snow, right? So I didn't want to put the power takeoff winch back on this, although I did have the potential. It had one before, and that's the PTO right there. And that's pretty valuable. I'm going to give it to a friend. And I found one on Craigslist, a 15,000 pound, 100% duty cycle PTO winch for $500 on Craigslist. But then you're dealing with the drive lines and all that stuff. And the other thing is, you can't get out of the vehicle when you want to run your winch, because the thing that stops the winch is the clutch. And yes, you can put a lever on your clutch, so you have a lever out here, and I had a rig like that before, but as little as we're hoping to use this, electric is much better, and you just have a 15-foot remote control that plugs into the side, and that seemed like to be the best plan. So we had a couple pieces of steel, and Dad and I got to kicking some ideas around, and I had cut the fair leads with the PTO winch came through here. So I cut all of that off, and I had one piece of ship's channel, and I was able to weld that in here, and then I turned Dad loose on it, and he came up with the mounts down there, which is the rectangular tubing, and then the stanchions for the fair leads. And he cut all the pieces, and I welded them in, and then he painted it up, and then I wired it, and we're off and going. So I think that's going to help a lot up on the mountain. In fact, I know it's going to help a lot. And yes, I've had Warren winches, and I've even had Warren's, the good old ones, get hot and have to wait on them. And I know the recovery cycle is a lot better on a $1,600 electric winch than it is a $300 electric winch. I get that, but when you're trying to get out, speed isn't the issue. It's not like you're trying to winch yourself to the top of a mountain to prove you can. That kind of thing. And this is really just about getting unstuck and getting home. I like to get home, especially when the weather is really bad. So we did this today, and one other thing. I didn't bring my keys up, but the solar charge controller and the breakers for that are in there, and the inverter is in that one. This pull-out tray in the sealed area wasn't big enough for both lithium batteries, so I've got one lithium battery in this compartment and the other one inside. So I'll show you under here first, under the jackknife bed. I went with the SOK batteries. And yeah, Battleborns are nice, but believe it or not, I prefer the SOK. And it's not just the price. The Battleborns aren't serviceable. The SOK are in a metal can. There's no destroying to get to the guts. You just unscrew the top, and you can pull the the BMS out and remove the individual cells. So if you lost a component on the BMS, or if you lost one cell, they're very easy to service. So I was impressed with that. They're grade A lithium iron phosphate cells. So they're essentially the same thing as a Battleborn, only I can service this one. And that was a big selling feature to me. So there's one in the outer compartment. It'll be insulated. And then there's one in here. And I went with buses. There's a bus there and a bus right here. So what I did is I made equal length cables for both batteries to the buses. And then you can see this is the shunt. And so the inverter and the IntelliCharger and the solar charger and the trailer DC loads are on one side of the shunt, and the other side goes to the battery. So this is the inverter. You can see the back side there. This is a 250 amp breaker. That breaker handles the DC loads and DC charging from the trailer. And then you've seen before in that compartment next to the TriStar, there's a breaker on the solar coming in, and then the DC charge current coming out of the charge controller to the batteries. And then there's a battery monitor right here. And since I have the IntelliCharger is not plugged in right now, so the LED lights in here are using 1.3 amps. Saying I have 199.9 amp hours left. The volts are at 13.9. So I have to still one more step to calibrate this. I have the only step left is I have to deplete the batteries as low as I want them to go, and then zero them out, and then the monitor will be accurate. So the other thing is I changed out the IntelliCharger for the 4-stage charge algorithm charger for lead acid batteries, and ordered one from IntelliPower that's made for lithium. So that's a 45 amp power factor corrected lithium, 14.6 volt constant current, constant voltage, and it is doing its job. Now the IntelliCharger for flooded lead acid would work if you push the pendant. It's got a little pendant that you push and it'll force it into bulk, and then it'll go through its absorb cycle, and that will charge lithium to 14.3 volts, which isn't full, but it's full enough. And actually your batteries probably would last longer if you did it that way. The only problem is you'd always have to push that button to get your batteries to charge. Otherwise, it's going to just hold it right at its 13.6, 13.7 float voltage, which is, you know, substantially undercharged. I don't know if it's 50, 60%, something like that. And if you wanted to go somewhere, you'd have to push the little button, and then it would charge it to about 80%, which is okay, but I have a friend that needed the old IntelliCharger. He lives off grid, and he just bought 4 new golf cart batteries, and all he has to charge them is the stock old school converter charger that's on his 5th wheel. So an IntelliCharger will help him out, and I didn't need it, so I think this thing's just about ready to go. I think we need to stock it, put our stuff in it, try to figure out how in the world we're going to move with our cat and our dog and all our stuff in inclement weather in March. That's going to be real interesting. But we'll bring the horse up when the fence is done. So we bought the rest of the fencing and another roll of wire, so we've got all of that. I think the major purchases are done. I'm going to take up this pine that we didn't sell. This is what I have left over from last summer. What I'm going to do is build a skirt underneath the whole thing, and underneath this with the big door right here, and I'll be able to pull my quad right under here and lock it up, and then probably have the dog house next to it for Gibbs, and that way we can keep the wind from blowing under it. And I'll have the 70-gallon tank, and hopefully we'll park it next to the septic tank, and we're going to learn what kind of weather we can live with in the fifth wheel. I'm thinking if I leave the heat on, just set it for 50 during the day, when we're gone it'll keep the pipes above freezing, and we'll probably go through a lot of propane, but the heater works really well. And there is a backup heater. This trailer came with two. It came with a forced air heater, and then it also came with this guy. And these are non-vented, and I don't think they're safe. You certainly wouldn't use it when you were sleeping. If you crack a window and if you had nothing else, you could keep your pipes from freezing. They're a lot more efficient, but you're breathing junk with these things. Although it is a catalytic type, and the better of the type, I think it's the platinum type catalytic, which is more efficient and burns the impurities off. But the biggest problem with these for me is the byproduct is water. When you burn propane, the byproduct is water. And that gets everything soaked in here, and your windows are wet on the inside and that sort of thing. So we wouldn't use it unless we absolutely had to. That's what I'm saying. But if the other one broke down, the forced air unit broke down, and we were about to freeze pipes, then I would definitely use it. So we're thinking, Carol is thinking, that her cat, Roger, is so precious, and he's never been outside in his life. And we're going to try to train him to be an outside cat, but that's going to be a slow process. If we've tried that before and done it wrong and lost the cat, they're coyote bait if you don't do it right. So we're trying to figure out where we could put a cat box in here, and where I could put his little feeder and water dish. Gibbs is fine wherever. He'll come in when it's cold and sleep on the linoleum floor, and if I tell him to stay, he won't budge until I tell him to move. He's just a great dog. But I think I'm going to lose my chair, and gosh, I really need this chair. But Carol's thinking she could put a cat box right there in the corner, one of those enclosed type. Or, the second the cat uses it, he comes and tells us, and then she goes and cleans it. It doesn't smell or anything. It is what it is. So she's thinking maybe take this drawer out and take this cupboard off, and then wall it in on one side so he could get under there and use that cat box in there. Of course, guys, we just say, oh, he'll be all right. He'll just be an outside cat. But it doesn't always work that way, does it? You know how it is. And that's good. If your wife was just like you, it'd be like being married to yourself. Yuck, huh? So I think it's been said before, vive la différence. Long live the difference. And really, the truth is, men and women are wired so differently. And if you recognize the differences, then you can celebrate the differences, and that's important. Anyway, that was for free. Hope everybody's doing well. Have a very, very blessed night.